everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first in our event series, Supply and Demand, which is being put together thanks to Project W, Black and Brown Founders, and Stimulus. I'm Nada Riskin, Program Manager of Project W, and I'm so excited for today's event, which will be focusing on sustainability, very fittingly on Earth Day. Before I pass along the virtual mic to our moderator, I just wanted to tell you all about Project W. Project W is an initiative powered by law firm Davis Wright Tremaine. We have a mission of helping female founders access the tools, resources, and networks they need to build and scale great companies. We have a couple of programs I wanted to share with you as applications for founders are currently open. Our first is our Emerging Food Brands Lab, which is a virtual program designed to help female-founded seed stage branded food companies. It's developed in collaboration with our firm's highly esteemed food and beverage practice, and it's a multi-week program that's crafted to help female founders take their brand to the next level. Through workshops dedicated to scaling production, optimizing distribution networks, raising capital, and dealing with supply chain issues. Applications close May 7th, and we'll be dropping the link in the chat for any founders who are interested in applying. And the next program is our Tech Equity Hub, which just launched applications earlier this week. It is a virtual program designed to unlock the potential of early stage Black and Latinx female founders. During the 12-week program, the cohort will engage in workshops, one-on-one mentoring sessions, and tech deep dives. Our expert faculty will cover topics from product design and evolution to finance and business strategy to fundraising and personal development. Applications for that close June 4th. And for those who are interested in applying, we should be dropping the link in the chat right below. So please check out both those programs. And with that, I'll now pass the mic over to the incredible Tiffany Stannard. She's founder and CEO of Stimulus, and we've had the pleasure of connecting with her as an alumna of one of Project W's own programs. Her company Stimulus is a software that helps companies optimize their supply chain and make better purchasing decisions. She's also the brainchild of this event series. So with that, thank you everyone, and I'm passing it over to Tiffany.
Hey everyone, I am so excited to be here. As she mentioned, this has been a brainchild of mine for probably like a year or two at this point. So excited to have this conversation. I feel like we're not having this conversation enough, especially as women founders. And like she said, Stimulus had the opportunity to participate in one of Project W's initiatives focused on SaaS companies, and an amazing experience. And so excited to be able to work not only with Project W, but also work with Black and Brown founders who I've had the opportunity to partner with in different capacities over the last few years, speaking and organizing and things of that nature. So excited to be here. As she mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of Stimulus, and we are a relationship intelligence platform that uses data and analytics to really help you make better purchasing decisions. So whether you are a small business, a startup, just trying to figure out who should you purchase from and work with to grow your business, or an enterprise really trying to streamline a lot of your manual processes in one place and also diversify your supply chain, our platform is able to help. And it's one of those conversations where, you know, people forget how much money you spend and how many resources you need to really grow your business. And you spend a lot of, whether it's your savings, your investment, your, customer income, purchasing from third parties to make your business run, to make it work. And if you're developing a physical product that you're looking to sell, whether on the website or through retail, you're spending even more. It takes multiple vendors to create one product that you're receiving from that, company that you're working with. So really excited to have this conversation. And as she mentioned, we're going to do a series of events because one, it's a lot to talk about. And two, we wanted to make sure that we feature amazing women doing amazing things and really help them discuss supply chain issues, industry trends, and optimize sustainability in their supply chain, and giving you growth hacks, our successes, our failures, things that we are learning to do, and the type of partnerships that we created. So today's the first event really focused on sustainability, as today is Earth Day and basically Earth Month, as we're celebrating and acknowledging sustainability throughout this entire month and hopefully continuously. And then in August, we're going to focus on diving deeper into the CPG industry and navigating supply chain issues. And then October, our event is going to really focus on digital and blockchain and supply chain, and making sure that we're covering as much as we can, even in between events, with content, continuing the conversation, and really, keeping up with women, supporting women as they are growing their businesses. So we're very excited to be speaking to the three women that are our panelists. I admire their products, their platforms. I've known each of them for a couple of years now, like maybe 2018, 2019, the world's a blur, but it's been a few years. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, their company, and then we're going to jump into the conversation. So I'm going to start with Martha.
Well, good morning and afternoon. My name is Martha Montoya, and I'm the CEO of AG Tools. It's trusted data from all over the world into a dashboard for the fruits, vegetables, nuts, herbs, and plants, which is what we are all now eating very healthy. And we have finally understood that we need to understand the supply chain, because we saw so much food being wasted during COVID-19. So that's where we fit in that industry of agriculture, specialty crops.
Awesome. And Bo?
Hi, I'm Bo Wangchakudi. I'm a founder and CEO of Armor Sui, and we provide the most gender inclusive and also sustainable options of PPE to hospital and clinical, providing measurable impact of them switching to disposable to more zero waste gowns.
Awesome. And Melissa?
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Lamar, and I'm the founder and CEO of Mel's Butter Blends. I make all natural hair care and skincare products from raw ingredients. So supply chain is a big issue for me every day, and I love being a part of this discussion. Thank you for including me.
Yes, as her skin is glowing right now. So I want to talk about, how did you get into your current industry? When you're building, a technology company, and then you have that focus of sustainability, really want to know your background of how you got started and then how you got to where you are today. So I'm gonna start with Melissa.
Well, my story starts with, I guess, fortunate accidents. I didn't plan to start my business. I was really looking for products that had natural ingredients when I decided to stop using chemical-based products on my hair and my skin. And it turned out that a lot of the products that are marketed towards natural hair or natural skincare have a lot of bad ingredients in them. So then I started making my own products, and after sharing it with folks, they started asking me for it, and really aggressively. And so then I started, making small batches and selling it on a small scale, and that scale grew. And eventually I was like, okay, well, I've been pretty much selling out of this consistently every time I make some. So let's see what happens if I actually get myself together and launch this business. So that was back in 2015. And then 2017, I incorporated, and it's been a roller coaster from there. It's definitely been a challenge finding the ingredients that I need in good quality for, good suppliers, and that have all the certifications that they need to have, and really being adamant about maintaining the purity of the ingredients that I use. It's been interesting to hear what people experience with skin issues and hair loss issues, and how there are really very few natural solutions to those problems. So I'm avid, always researching what is available in in nature to address the issues that we come across.
Yeah, I mean, they always say the problems that we solve normally starts with us, right? Solving your problem and being your own customer. So
Right.
interesting. Bo?
Yeah, funny. Marissa mentioned that she inventing her own product for herself, because for me it was a similar experience. I came from a background as PhD chemist. I worked in a lab for close to 10 years. And one of those days when I went in the lab, I had a chemical spill accident where it almost took my life away. And it's simply because my personal protective equipment, which is my lab coat, did not do its job. So the chemical burned right through, and it could have been so much worse, but I recovered from it. What I learned from that incident is that there weren't enough functional protective equipment for women. The size and the aesthetic were limited. So I started creating a product after talking to 100 women, and they told me that they feel the same. And so our first line of product actually came from, the idea of talking to these women and do crowdfunding campaign to raise enough money for first production in 2018. We grew from there. We became a supplier of Thermo Fisher. We sell it to academia. And when the pandemic hit last year, we really saw the opportunity and gaps around the healthcare industry. So we expand from just selling to women in laboratory to expand to gender size inclusive product for healthcare. And one of the biggest thing in PPE, I feel like a lot of people understand, is the PPE shortage during the pandemic. And what I found looking at the industry is that the supply chain for PPE is broken. So we have created a really easy way for hospital and clinic to leverage 100% made and source product in the US, and then more sustainable options of reusable, recyclable, zero waste gowns as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And I've been so proud to watch as your product has expanded over the last couple of years. And especially when you got into PPE and then you got into Techstars around that same time. So it's been beautiful to really see your company grow over the last couple of years. So that's amazing. Martha?
Well, I like the fact that it started with the two ladies before. Mine was a little bit different. I immigrated to the United States, and my first job was sourcing because of my language skills and my cultural skills, sourcing for companies in the United States and Europe, and Australia and New Zealand in the Americas, from Mexico down the border. So because of my cultural background, I was able to start sourcing. And what I discovered, which now hopefully people will know, is that in every farm, 95% of the farms in this world are family owned. And if you ask who makes decisions in a family, it's normally the wife or the mother or the sister. So throughout the world, I learned that this whole farming industry was always on the thin air, almost breaking down. And it was the woman who had the least amount of decision make. I mean, she would decide, but she would be told mainly what to do by the industry versus her knowing her guts what she would do. So long story short is that I started understanding that data was the one place where women appreciated knowing things that the quote unquote husband knew, but by her knowing more, she would be better making decision making in that family farm thinking. And so long story short is that we created this platform into, well, so having knowing that, how do we create a data that would provide to the farmers, quote unquote, the wives or the mothers or the sisters data to be able to determine what to do. And we launched, I had a privilege and I had a blessing, which is I have two brothers who are engineers. So I'm a chemist and biologist, but they are the computer science and the machine learning, artificial intelligence. So I had that benefit as a person in this business. So I've been behind them learning technology, while normally, but the creativity comes from myself.
Awesome. That's amazing. So as we celebrate Earth Day and we know how you eat and what you eat affects your, community, it affects the earth, all of that. discuss how your product is helping the farmers and communities and the importance of sourcing food locally and what you've seen over the years when it comes to sustainability and how we can do better.
So I learned long time ago supply chain, which used to be called logistics in the world. I used to say logistics and people understood. I remember my first deck had supply chain and people would look at me like, what is supply chain? Supply chain is taking a product from point A to point B with a minimum amount of problems involved. And so what has happened is that even when the toilet paper crisis happened, everything comes from nature. Everything comes from nature. Even the auto industry right now is almost paralyzed because they don't have enough chips. But guess what? That comes from a mine. That comes from nature. So the supply chain starts before it goes into a distribution center. And what happens is that most of our buyers across the world, wonderful human beings that hardly had ever gone into the plants or the processing plants or even the ground for that matter. So they're making certain decisions in the vacuum of data. And so even for the PPP, which I remember getting calls whether I would get involved in that in the industry, I'm like, no, there's a whole chain of command here that everybody has to understand. In the ingredients, there's a chain. So I would say that we got all impacted by the fact that now we know that if we don't, we have to depend on our local farmers, and we should start eating what our local regions produce. Let's not try to eat something every year. Peaches is a good example. We have less peach farmers in the United States every year because the consumer has learned to have peaches all year round, but they don't taste as good as the Georgia and the Southern Carolina peaches. So people stop eating them, and now we have less farmers here, and not only the consumption is going down, the price is going down, and the production is going down.
So true. Oh my goodness. I learned, I have a couple of friends that started a garden here in our neighborhood and started sourcing and educating people on the different foods that they were eating or should be eating. And they said, hey, you should not be buying peaches this time because it's not good, or strawberries at this time, at certain times to buy these foods. So you brought up some good points of people actually learned what supply chain was in 2020, from the shortage of toilet paper, paper towel, your Peloton bike that you were not getting on time, right? So I want to ask the other ladies, Bo and Melissa, what was your understanding of supply chain prior to starting your business? And what is your understanding now that you have this business and a lot of your focus is on supply chain and supply chain issues? I'll start with Melissa. Why are you making that face?
I knew nothing about supply chain it by comparison to what you learn, because then you have so many perspectives to deal with, because you're a customer from one point of view, right? You're ordering stuff, you're waiting for a vendor to send you what you need for you to do your part, so then you can relay it to your customer. And then in turn, your customers don't always see that because they're just your customer, right? So they're not thinking of the trickle down effect. They're just like, I don't have my stuff. What's happening? So I learned the importance of planning for that aspect, and also forecasting, and also understanding the seasonalities of a business, because most businesses have, peak periods, if it's a quarter or a season, depending on what the industry is. So knowing, okay, this is my peak season, so I need to make sure I'm ordering all of my supplies in advance so that if there are any issues, I still have what I need in time to, hit my production goals. So it makes you a little bit more paranoid with preparing and planning in a lot of ways. Whereas before, when I was making small batches, I could realistically be in the process of making something and be like, oh, I don't have this, but now I don't have the luxury of that, right? So I can't have anything be held up because I forgot to order that one thing. So you have to be much more prepared. You have to be crafty. You have to be good at research at this point. I pretty much 2020 was definitely a lesson in supply chain for sure. Everybody and their mom started making hand sanitizer. So I couldn't find bottles for months. There's still, multiple companies that have back orders posted for like July 2021. That's when we're going to be restocked with bottles. And I'm like, you didn't, we still didn't figure this out. It's like a year later. What is happening?
Right.
So it's just a lesson in patience, a lesson in planning, PPP, in so many ways.
Well, then I'm gonna go with the bow, as she knows how to create sustainable PPE. So speak about your knowledge of supply chain and what you learned throughout this process. And one thing we spoke about earlier was understanding that, and especially in that industry, people like to buy a lot of stuff cheaply in bulk and then worry about the debt later, but it's not great for the environment. It's not great for, carbon footprint and all of that. So speak to that as well.
Yeah, so because we were a small business in the beginning, our quantity is low, but we need to make sure that the quality of things that we're producing need to be high. We made conscious decision in the beginning to rely on made and source 100% product, everything, down to the buttons to the zipper in the US. Just because we could control quality, we know it's made here. There's a document that is not going to run out of supply, here in the US. So we weren't conscious about costs in the early on in the business, but care about where it's coming from and sustainability in terms of always have everything that create our product in place. As I grew my business, I learned that that's actually the really smart way of doing a business, especially when you sell in the US. Because like everything else is not controlled by when it's going to deliver, like the price of the global economy, but it's about like supporting people around you. And most of our supplier and manufacturers are family owned, like either immigrant or minority owned business. And they love working with small company because like we are more flexible working with them than big companies that only negotiating on price. So now we have, a bunch of partners and vendors and supplier who basically minority owned women-led business, all sourced and made 100% in the US. I thought that was a smart decision. Now, the past year, as you mentioned, with the PPE shortage, like it's a supply chain issue, right? What we learned is all the PPE products are disposable. It's bad for the environment. It's made in China, most of them. And people are still buying from it just because the cost of it per use when they first buying it is cheaper. They don't look at what it looks like in terms of effect across the board to the business here in the US, or they don't look at what it is in terms of the cost of environmental impact in the long run, which actually will be greater when you look at it in the long run. The cost of processing plastic or the cost of dealing with waste that's just going to be there for 400 of years, it's not comparable when you just look at the 90 cents per gallon or a $2 per gallon that made here in the US. So what we creating at Armor3 is an easiest way for hospital and clinic to use washable, reusable gowns, which everything that go into that type of product could be made and sourced in the US. And it's a good case of what would you do again if you have to see crisis? How could you source things sustainably, and how could you not create waste in the long run?
Those are good points. Like, how would you change things if you forecast COVID was happening and things of that nature? So that's really interesting because I've had many conversations, with corporations, and they really focus on, competitive pricing and quick and then worrying about the future later. And now as things are happening, through sustainability and earth and carbon footprint and all of these things, later came quickly, right? And a lot of things being destroyed, and people need to understand the importance. Like, you can no longer have sustainability as an afterthought, right? People are looking for great products, premium products, and will pay that extra amount if it's something that they know is also helping their community and creating jobs and things of that nature. Martha, one of the conversations we've had in, being in supply chain and working in supply chain, very male, as a lot of things are, So across the board, this question is for all, but I'll start with Martha. How are you or your product really innovating and disrupting, traditional categories, right? Certain things we call logistics, now a supply chain, to really create culturally relevant products? Because as even Bo mentioned earlier, a lot of these companies are minority owned and immigrant owned and all of that, but we're not getting put in the forefront or even, obtaining that contract all of the time to really showcase what our product or service can do.
Sorry about that. There, thank you for that question, Tiffany, because it's crucial to understand that it's been a, as Bill mentioned, it's been a wave of human change to go to cheap versus quality. And that I'm talking about the United States, but I'm talking even, I said in Latin America. So at what point do we touch the bottom of understanding that we're impacting not only the world, but our environment? So I'll give you one example of one of our biggest customers that is the largest avocado buyer in the world after the retailer. And they used to do guacamole campaigns when consumers apparently want it. But when they saw production and they see that the production is in a different time of the year where consumers want, and because they have the pool to do the campaign whenever they want to, literally. So the campaign now is based, the guacamole campaign is based on production, which means two things. One, we don't want to kill more trees to produce more avocados at times when there's not avocados. Two, now we can organize better truckings and mean less carbon footprint on the road because now everything is during the peak season. Three, we're not going to waste when there's overproduction. What happens is we throw away in this country 4,900 truckloads per day of fruits and vegetables from farm to distribution centers. So now we can rearrange trucks to arrive into distribution centers when there's a guacamole campaign, not when there's not enough. And fourth, the corporation is making great money because they're buying at lower cost when there's peaks of productions. And the final and all of it, which is the bottom line of all this, the communities, those little farmers, because remember, 95% of the farmers produce for the larger shippers, the communities stay intact because they stay sustainable. So it's a whole, and I remember 10, 15 years ago, Tiffany, I remember talking about the sustainability index, but nowhere there was a social impact anywhere. I think that finally people are starting to understand that there's more to earth than earth is the communities.
That's a good point. Like bringing that social impact with sustainability, like not even just saving money, but also making sure that you're creating jobs and you are buying locally. So that's really important. What about you, Melissa? You being in the beauty industry, and definitely starting to see more, Black companies and, retail and things of that nature. Can you talk about how you're innovating that industry? And also even just with sustainable, like you said, products, but then also the containers that they come in, right? All of those things that are always plastic, right? You throw them out, you get another one.
Right.
So talk to that.
Sure. In terms of how we're innovating, I have a couple of points. I wanted to move away from the separation and segmentation that happens with beauty and cosmetics products. So, the blue and gray bottles are for men and the pink and colorful stuff is for women. And I'm like, do we not have the same skin or hair? Like, I don't understand, and then for kids, it's this. So for me, it was like, I don't want to do anything that's overly gendered. I don't want to do anything that's overly like just for kids, just for women, just for Black women or whatnot. Like we all have skin, we all have hair. It's different textures. What does each texture need across the spectrum, and how can we make things a little bit more universal? So my packaging isn't, bright pink and colorful. It's like neutral colors that you'll find in nature. All the products can be used again by women, men, children of all ethnicities. It's not about who you are, where you come from. It's about how dry your hair is, how dry your skin is, so let's focus on that. So that's number one. And then the ingredients that I choose to use, are very focused, and it's not like I don't want to create, a new product line every year just because there are new buzzwords happening in the industry about what ingredients or what. I create products for a purpose. So if somebody's telling me, if I get so many requests for a type of issue, I'll research the issue. I'll figure out what are the best ingredients to deal with that. And then I'll start experimenting based on that. I just don't create products just to create more products. And that's kind of like anti my philosophy. I want to create all the products that I need to create and stop. Like, it's not going to be Mel's releasing a new product line every 6 months. And so with that, it cuts down on the amount of products that people need to take care of their bodies, to take care of their hair or skin. You don't have to buy 3 different shampoos for, the parents and the kids or whatever. Like, everybody should be able to use the same products in a family or a household or however it is. So those are the main 3 things that I like to focus on that troubled me about just the way that the industry is, and ethnic hair care here, men's stuff over there, kids over here. Like, I don't think that's all necessary.
You brought up some great points. I've had this conversation for many years, like when a Black woman is creating hair care or skincare products, they automatically assume it's just for Black women. It's always that misconception that you can only sell or only create those types of products. So the fact that you even thought about it as you started, not to say that we don't sometimes need specialized stuff, right? But it's understanding that us as Black women can create products for the masses, right? And that our products are thought out and beautiful and can be for skin, can be for everything. And I love your way of thinking when it comes to how you're creating products, and how, you're not just creating a bunch of products like just to create them, but they're for a reason and they're helping certain issues that people are having. That's awesome, because I've had this conversation for so many years.
Thank you. I mean, that's a bigger conversation for another day. Just the assumption that Black-owned businesses should only be supported by Black people, or, things that are cultural. Like, I like, other types of cuisine. So I go to everybody's restaurants. I can go to different people's, cultural businesses and still appreciate them for what they do and still support them. So I think that it doesn't make sense for folks to get so stuck on only, this group of folks is going to support our business, or we only make things for this group of people. That's not really a sign of a healthy business. I think it should be a little bit more. You should have a target audience, but your products and services should be used by a larger, group of people.
Exactly. And Bo, I'm gonna close with you on that. Conversation we had with PPE, and probably, I guess, forever, that has always been disposable, quick and cheap, and you're coming with something that's innovative, sustainable, washable, reusable. How have people perceived you with that? Like, what do you mean we've never done it this way? You know what I mean? Like that type of conversation that you're having from hospitals to schools, and showing like, no, this makes sense, and we should have been doing this a long time ago.
Yeah, so we addressing the 3 major gaps in the PPE industry. Like the first one you mentioned, sustainability angle. Second is product that could be made and sourced locally and domestically within the US. And from the third perspective, our first challenge that we were trying to solve for PPE industry is size inclusive, gender inclusive products. And all those things are really hard to accomplish if you use disposable, because, disposable are plastic, they generate waste. These are like plastic bag. It's basically not compostable in any way, or reusable, recyclable in any way. That they're not sourced here in the US. Most of the major suppliers are in overseas. And from a third perspective, like disposable product only come in typically 1 or 2 sizes, a standard extra large. And for women who are smaller frames, or even individual with smaller frame, customization in terms of things that actually fit and protect them, it's just really difficult. And it's surprising because 80% of women in 80% of healthcare workers are actually women. Think of the nurses and the doctors and everyone else involved, and there's actually no product that fit them. You actually not equipping them with things that protects them. So what we create for hospital and clinics is an easier way for them to change their mindset, right? Washable PPE has been around forever. In fact, it was before we switched to disposable, but because the ease of use and the cost effectiveness at when you bought it, you don't see it at the end. That's why a lot of hospital and clinic switches. So what we have done is we built a platform fully automated by our software and our tracking system to make washable, reusable, and recyclable PPE easier for clinic and hospital. So take the work out of it and don't have them to change their workflow, and truly show the impact that is better in the long run in terms of cost. It's accessible. Like you never run out of it because everything could be sourced and made here in the US. And then the sustainable impact is huge. So by making it easy and show the measure impact, we are hoping to really change the conversation around what is actually a better option.
Wow, that's amazing. And I definitely never knew that they didn't have like the different sizes for the folks that are working and taking care of people every single day. And that's just disheartening. And I just remember, you know, I have a lot of friends in healthcare and things throughout 2020, and just thinking about, you know, the shortage, but then just the support that they needed and the support that they end up getting throughout the year. So thankful.
Yeah, so a couple of things I like to point out. Disposable are only supposed to be for one-time use, right? And when there's a lot of PPE shortage happening across the country, people are required to reuse the one-time use product over and over again. That's not safe, first of all. And in some places, they don't even have product available, so that you see nurses wearing garbage bag, which is like mind-blowing.
Yeah, we saw that. It's unfortunate.
Mind-blowing. So yeah.
Wow. What we've seen also throughout the last, you know, year or so, there was a new focus with Fortune 1000 companies on diversifying their supply chains and purchasing from diverse businesses. Have you had the opportunity to really take advantage of those opportunities? And then what are some ways that they can support businesses like yourselves? Because one of the things that we are doing and prepping for throughout these series of events is partnering with corporations and financial institutions and all of that to make sure that they understand, one, what businesses are there and available, how to purchase locally, but then also trying to see more ways to support small businesses as they either are trying to expand, reopen, open to full capacity, depending if you maybe went down to half capacity. So talk about any experiences that you've had with, you know, these institutions and ways that they can support your business and other businesses similar. I'll start with Martha.
I would say that when COVID-19 hit, remember we all were going to be in the houses for 3 months. So corporations were not there moving because it's only 3 months, right? I would say that it started to finally hit them somewhere in June or July, that maybe this is longer, maybe there's larger liabilities bringing people to work. So maybe we need to start shifting a little bit our thinking process here, especially the bureaucracies that exist in these corporations. And I call it bureaucracies in a positive way. That's how companies are built. But they realized that this was a completely different game. And I'm talking from a person who have seen wars. I lived wars. I've lived strikes. I live even apartheid in South Africa. I mean, shipping to South Africa in the middle of apartheid. That was a challenge. Let's put it that way. So we have an earthquake in California where it collapsed the whole infrastructure. So we have been living many things, but corporations were always kind of, we can sort this out. But this one was becoming bigger. So I think a couple of things happened, and I saw it myself in my industry. CEOs got more nimble, which normally was more like he or she was up there. Now they're more nimble, and they gave a little bit more of a free hand to the C-level to experiment. and the creation of these new funds, even within the corporations, of one investing to companies that have the new ideas, have blossomed, I mean, have grown up to. So I would say that it has been good, but started until July, August, not before that. Before they still were holding it tight. And then comes our, fortunately, social issue with our African American community. And they're like, well, maybe there's more to the story that was brewing underneath the surface. It was, and this was just the I'm from Colombia, and the story says that when the Spaniards wanted a jar for the flowers, the local broke the jar, and it was not the jar that broke; it was the war started. It was the beginning of, and COVID-19 was the beginning of a lot of things that were brewing in there. And thank God for it.
Yeah, very true. You know, a lot of stuff came to light, as people say, because people were home and they finally started to pay attention to things that were happening and, like you said, brewing, and just came into full ahead throughout that time frame. And because people, you know, whether they were furloughed or working from home now, they finally paid attention to things that were, you know, being talked about and happening. So I think what I found from working with corporations and, you know, had a good partnership with Google, and then they, you know, did their Black Founders Fund, and we became a recipient, and really starting to see companies put their money where their mouth was, and quickly. You had some that's still taking forever. It's been, you know, some months. And then you have
Couple
some,
100 years, I would say.
well, yes, we must do this time. But even previously to that, but folks that actually moved quickly, put it out there and started to move quickly, like we can't wait another 5 years, another whatever. So Melissa, I want you to speak to that, because I know
But
you are.
one second, Tiffany,
Yeah.
before you go, I want to make sure I close on that, something that's important, which is supply chain.
Mm,
Also, corporations did not understand supply chain was so broken before
true.
it completely broke. It was broken all along, and I knew it 27 years. So that also COVID-19 did that with the social enterprising, that there was a couple things that collapsed at once there.
No, that's true. Cause I got a lot of customers that were thinking briefly about visibility, but not knowing, one, who was local to them, how to replace a product or service that they could no longer get in another country. So it's like they knew, but didn't care as much, or didn't think it was going to get as broke as it became over that time, which was very interesting. So Melissa, speak to your experience, your partnerships, and I know you're in the process of going into retail. So speak to that. I know locally here in Philly.
Oh, so much, so many things to say because that was a lot. So the corporation and foundation wise, my main thing, I'm like 100% honest, even when it's not appreciated. So for me, it's like I don't enjoy the superficial performative things of, ooh, Black Lives Matter, we're going to send out this email, but we're going to still charge astronomical rates that Black founders can't afford to participate in our programming, or, you know, to have a space here, or whatever the case is. So for me, it's like, be real about it, right? And be consistent about it. Not just for the month of June because there were just protests, right? Like, what is the long-term commitment and into growing this thing? So for me, that has been about intentional spends, and, you know, especially with like city contracts and larger institutional organizations, like having an intentional spend with MWBE businesses. And again, not in a superficial performative way where we put their name down and really give the work to subcontractors, but where we actually get the capital to these businesses and are able to build capacity, especially when it comes to mentoring relationships with businesses, larger companies partnering with smaller companies, you know, helping them build their capacity along the way, especially for MWBE businesses. Because a lot of situations that I've been in, it's been like, who has been here? Who can help guide me through this? You know what I mean? There are very few folks in this space, and then very few, even fewer, who have gotten to the point where I want to be, right? And they might not necessarily have time to be my mentors, but who else is, you know, available in that world that I can learn from? So that's one thing. So the intentional spends, being consistent about how they actually support, and then these initiatives being long-term. Like I know CHOP has a program where they're trying to source products from local skincare businesses. So, and basically evaluating all of their vendor contracts, I think is a big thing for large corporate institutions. And that's mostly the lack of communication between departments and people. And I have another big issue with people creating situations and spaces and then other people existing in them. Is like the people who created are in their cushy offices or working from home, and then the people on the ground are like in the freezing cold or in extreme heat, and you don't know what their experience is. So no communication between the people creating spaces and the people existing in spaces. So I think that if there's more communication in those realms, then we'll have more relevant programming coming out, more relevant situations created for businesses to actually grow.
Right. No, you bring up some great points, and I love that intentional spend. And unfortunately, it's the catch-22. People say, hey, over the next 5 years, we're going to do this, versus we're going to continue this throughout the rest of our business life, right? So it's like this
Right.
time frame of deciding in the next 2-3 years, are we going to continue this or stop this, right? Based upon what you may or may not see in these next 3 years. So Bo, speak to some of your partnerships, because I know throughout this time you created some amazing partnerships with new companies and companies you probably already had relationships with as well, that has, you know, a new focus for small businesses. And then after that, I'm going to do one more question. We're going to close out because I want to make sure we get to questions before 3. As I say, time flies an hour. So I want to touch on that.
Yeah, so I can speak from the angle of healthcare, including a large healthcare system. I wholeheartedly agree with Marissa that it sounds good in theory for hospital or healthcare system to get behind, you know, supporting more diverse business, more smaller business, locally business. But the truth of the matter of fact is they already signed exclusive contract with larger vendors that preventing us from doing business with them. And that's difficulties of, you know, trying to support and promote something that's had a greater good purpose behind it, and then also still kind of dab their foot on, you know, trying to get contract that are cheaper, bigger, more established, and maybe less diverse. So I think in order for, you know, Fortune 1000 companies or bigger, larger organization to really truly support this, there's gonna have to be a mind shift within the leadership, the organization, and potentially the federal as well to really support it completely. Because otherwise, it sounds good in theory. They want to support it, but there's contractual issues and the infrastructure that does not support a lot of things. And we see that when we start working toward partnership with some larger organization, we had good tractions. And once we get to like a contract, you know, process, then things get really slowed down and stuck, which for small business is almost like a killer.
It is a killer. It really is. To Melissa's point earlier about pricing and stuff that we can't afford depending on the size of your company. Go ahead, Melissa.
I wanted to add something to that because a conundrum for me as well in terms of supply chain, or like was my struggle to find a co-packer. So I think part of the issue is not having enough, I don't know if it's directories or what it is, just having those databases of knowing who's in the space to do what. A lot of it is, you know, individual sources. Like I had to talk to so many people before I found someone who sent me like a list of Pennsylvania co-packers for natural products. And I'm like, where have you been? Like, you know what I'm saying? I've been looking at this forever, because most of the people I was finding were more in the food space and not so much in the beauty space. So I think that having more of that information publicized and being clear about who's available within certain industries or what companies exist and locally, you know, by city, by state, whatever it is, regionally, because that was a real struggle. And that's a real struggle for a lot of folks who are looking to either find a space to grow into, like a commercial kitchen, or to outsource completely. It's a struggle. So I don't feel like that information is as widely publicized. And I think that that's usually when people end up in a scramble doing the research, trying to find where they're already at the point where they need to outsource it. And then it's even, compounded by not being able to find the right partner for that.
No,
So I
you
think there's some kind of industry databases that are a little bit more populated with that information.
No, you make some great points, and that's actually goes into my final question of, any closing thoughts on sustainability, but also tools that you utilize and any growth hacks that you figured out in growing your business, from pricing knowledge, like you spoke about earlier, Melissa, to local manufacturers and getting that list. One thing we do at Stimulus is really help you do that custom search and finding great businesses and products and all of that. But also just knowing anything that you've done that sometimes you have to kind of pull together to make it work for you and your business. And then we'll jump into questions and close out.
I would say access to capital. It's crucial for the supply chain in general, because it is an industry that it needs a lot of patience now that everybody understood that it's broken. So, and we women have been doing supply chain all our lives because we manage many areas of our family, our parents, our husbands, our wives, whatever. So we're very supply chain inclined in many areas. So we are good, but we need the capital. And thank you, Tiffany, for bringing that up. But we need patient capital.
True. And Bo?
For me, it's what I think make the most different for me is talking to customer. I think customer discovery and having more interaction with customers is really important in determine pricing and understand their requirements. And that would be tied to, like what type of document and information you need to incorporate into your playbook in terms of qualifying manufacturer and vendors. For us, we just think that we learn best when we're talking to the customer itself.
Got it. Melissa?
For me, the network has been the most important. Having a good network of folks that I can complain to, and they'll be like, oh, solution in an email, 2 seconds. And I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? So for me, it's just been about talking about my experiences with folks. And then it'll be like a group of mentors, and they're like, oh, I have that solution for you. Just 1 second. And they make an introduction, problem solved. So I think a lot of it is making sure that you're plugged into the right places, that you are participating in your ecosystem, wherever you are, whether it is for startups or for your particular industry, that you're at least plugged in with at least some of the leaders in that space, wherever you are, and just the small business support organizations in general, small business development centers, places that have sources of information for you, and just signing up for those newsletters, finding out about funding sources. I think that's all important, to at least sign up to receive the information or put yourself in places where you can receive information, because you never know what you'll find out if you ask.
Yeah. Sure.
So for me, like a Google search isn't always the answer.
No. It's not.
Even though we think it is these days. I'm like, you should probably ask somebody about that.
I mean, not if a million things come back and you're like, well, I got to now go through a million answers.
Right. Exactly. And not all of them are particularly accurate. And then people pay for, to come up in searches. So who knows? There's one piece that I wanted to mention as well, with the retail component, because that's the goal for most folks, even though people don't understand the costs associated with that as well. And really making sure that understanding your costs once you start outsourcing manufacturing and how that changes, because now you can't manually fulfill orders once you move into retail. I mean, you can if you're crazy, but it's not really a strategy for success. and even learning things about, the displays that you use in the store and things like that. Like, you have to pay to get that stuff created. The store's not going to magically create it for you. So there's a lot of cost with that. And folks think that that's like the best strategy, but retail doesn't necessarily work for everyone, or your margins might have to change before you can really get in there.
Yeah, no, those are good points. And that's a whole conversation in itself. So I know we're going to talk about that more in August, of like, if you are deciding to stay online, or are you deciding to do both online and sell into a retailer, and all of the costs that associated. And, you sell more, your pricing is a little higher on your website than it is on the store, because they need to buy it in bulk. So you're going to lower your prices. And how do you make up for that? Right. So
Right.
definitely want to go deeper into the conversation. We have like 3 minutes left. So let me get to one question, because then I want to make sure that we give a chance for Black and Brown Founders, one of our organizers, to speak about their program and their initiatives, and then close out. And as I mentioned, everyone, we will be continuing this conversation. We're going to figure out where a lot of these questions and talks will live. I probably won't do Facebook page, because I'm not on Facebook anymore, but but a place that we can make sure in between the events that you have the opportunity to ask questions, speak to the speakers, and all of that. So one of the questions is, it seems that many of us recognize there are significant challenges with the supply chain, and that we can digitize, that can help. Digitizing can help that. Where are digital tools falling short in supply chain management, and where are they succeeding? Where do you think they could get better? So I'm just going to have Martha answer that, just because you have your technology solution as well, and you've been doing it for so long. And then we're going to close out with Black and Brown Founders.
I would say that the most important thing is data, simple data, bits of data, not too much data. I think we're a little bit overwhelmed with data, and started again fast, because it was 3 months. Now it's our life, part of our life. So what we're short is too much data all of a sudden. How do we make it simpler for us human beings to absorb the data? And you have to still remember that the big decisions are still made by not 20, 30, but 30, 40, 50-year-olds, which is much harder to absorb. So that's where I think, and dealing with a lot of supply chain executives, that's what I'm understanding, that it's harder to absorb the data. Make it simpler. That's what we're short. What we're doing good is more data. So it's how to channel the data. So I would use a word that I used to use, one of my industries, edu entertainment. Let's try to entertain while we bring data.
I like that.
Think about that, Tiffany. Edu entertainment.
I like that. All right, ladies. So we are about to close out, but I want to bring on Del, Executive Director of Black and Brown Founders, one of our amazing organizers, to speak about Black and Brown Founders, give an overview, but then any initiatives that you have coming up for our audience.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. I am really grateful to all of the folks that have helped to organize this, in particularly Tiffany, who is just always so great to work with. Her understanding of the needs of entrepreneurs, specifically women of color entrepreneurs, is always on point. So when she suggested that we put together the series, I just let her lead with it and supported her along the way. I think sometimes the best way that you can support people is just getting out of their way when they know what they're doing. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank our partner, Project W, as well. And in particular, Sarita Martin, as part of the BBF team, who's always there helping us out. But more importantly, also leading in some of these conversations. As Tiffany mentioned, my name is Del Medina. I'm the Executive Director of Black and Brown Founders. I'm really excited to see how this series develops, and I hope that as folks interact with this information, they find ways that are helpful for them in their entrepreneurial journey. We have a program at Black and Brown Founders that helps you go from your idea to your first couple of dollars and your prototype. It's our Bootstrapping Bootcamp. We have scholarships available. If you know of anyone or you yourself are interested in building a business, we work with folks that are building tech and tech-enabled business. We believe that all businesses today are tech-enabled, because it doesn't matter if you open a panaderia around the corner, a bakery, a coffee shop, you are going to be using software in some way, shape, or form. And we want to help you be successful in building your businesses. So please go to our Bootstrapping Bootcamp. and check us out. We love working with entrepreneurs. I really want to thank Bo, Martha, and Mel for all of the wisdom that you gave. I learned a lot from this conversation. Mel is someone who has a family that has different textured hair on all our heads. We struggle with like all the bottles because one person has this kind of hair, the other person has that kind of hair. So I totally get that. Martha, as a fellow Colombiana de Barranquilla, I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing around agriculture. I think that so often we do not think about how we feed ourselves and where that food comes from, and the supply chain around food and food security right now has shown us during the pandemic how really broken things were. So when you mentioned that, I was like, yes, some of us have known that our supply chain has been broken for a really long time, and nobody's been willing to invest in this because they've managed to patch things together in a way that has benefited big, large corporations. So thank you for speaking on that. And Bo, when you mentioned the fact that so many folks are working within healthcare are women, and I didn't realize the problems that people had in terms of finding things that work for themselves. As a petite person, I can tell you I've had injuries because things aren't made for me. As a left-handed person, I can tell you I've had injuries because things aren't made for me. And so it just made me realize that while people are talking about personalization and talking about using artificial intelligence and machine language programming around how do we get closer to understanding what customers need, the reality is that we do need that personalization, and we cannot be assuming that the prototype for the worker is a male, and in particular a white male. That the reality is that as we're undergoing a demographic shift, how do we all have ownership stake in this country in a way that serves us, but serves the country overall? Because the reality is that all of you in particular, and I know Tiffany, you and I have had conversations around data, how do we use that data to further our goals is really important to us at Black and Brown Founders. We use data a lot to inform the work that we do, which is how we built the Bootstrapping Bootcamp, because we wanted to understand what were the particular needs and frustrations that Black and Latinx folks were having. And we believe that our program, while it's open to everybody else, it's specific to our communities. And we believe that that specificity actually allows us to be able to do outreach to everybody, because if it's a problem for us, it's a problem for many people. And that is part of the work that we're all going to undergo as we're getting out of this pandemic. So I just want to thank all of you for sharing your expertise, for teaching all of us. And I look forward, Tiffany, to the ongoing conversations so that we can continue to educate folks and give people, I love how you asked that question about like, what is a particular hack? Because I think so often we don't have that perspective. People are trying to figure out how do I do this thing, and being specific about a thing that works and that can work for many people is really important. So thank you all. I'm going to kick it back to you, Tiffany, and I look forward to seeing you guys, I think in a month, right? What's the date of the next one?
Got a couple months.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
We needed time.
Right. No, that's fine. I time travel, so I always forget about dates. So that's why I'll defer to you. But I hope that the folks who are listening to this also on the recording, you know, you've gotten a chance to learn, and to please follow all of these experts and their companies if you're interested in the work that they're doing, to find ways to support them as well.
Yes, thank you so much. So yes, we will be continuing this conversation even after this event, and sharing the recording with all of the attendees and making sure that we are exchanging growth hacks and resources, especially leading up to the next event in August. And then the final one will be in October as we're discussing different areas. So we will make sure to connect you to all of these speakers, and not even just speakers, but we're partnering with additional corporations such as Google for Startups and other amazing organizations that have really put out time and efforts and initiatives to diversify their supply chains and be intentional, like Melissa said, and not just do it, you know, once in a while, but really make it a part of their business. Thank you all for attending. Amazing conversation. I could talk even longer because we had some questions we didn't even go over yet. So, but we will do that throughout like a blog post and other ways to make sure that we're answering all of your questions. I want to thank Project W and Black and Brown Founders for partnering with myself and my company Stimulus to really execute on this conversation. And we will see you all soon.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
for having me. Appreciate you guys. Take
Thank
care.